I really wanted to talk about your impact that you're having because I know there's been a lot of changes in the financial world and the way the whole world is working. But lots of people pivoted recently, and I wonder how you found these changes.
Yeah, no, there's a huge amount going on in the investment world where I'm based. We focus on private equity investing, so we're looking for fast-growing companies where our investors can come in and maybe get a XX, 10x uplift in a 3 to 5 year period. So we do a lot of due diligence on them, and if they pass all of that, then we make them available to our members. We've got just under 200 high net worth members that we've built a relationship with over the years. And what's really interesting is that there's a massive wealth transfer going on from old farts like me and the baby boomer generation through to Gen X and millennials. And, depending on whose figures you believe, it's anything from 60 to $120 trillion will change hands over the next 10 to 15 years. And what's really interesting is the people who are inheriting that wealth from their parents have got a very different mindset and outlook to the ones their parents had. The parents tend to have made their money in business, and then they go very much into a kind of wealth conservation mode. Whereas the next generation may or may not have any involvement with the family business. They become almost like professional investors, and they're looking for more wealth creation opportunities. So they're being much more ambitious and aggressive in their investment choices, and they're actually being a lot more demanding of their wealth managers. And one of the statistics I've seen that's from a wealth report coming out in a few weeks' time is that 81% of these, what we might call next generation inheritors of the wealth, are going to change their wealth management company as soon as they can because they want different things like access to private equity. So it's very much a changing world, and thankfully from our perspective it's changing in a direction I think will be very, very helpful for us.
Yeah. What has surprised you with regards to the changes that have occurred recently?
I think it's really that people are wanting a bit more excitement in the portfolio. If you look at the choices that were made by their parents, a lot of it was going into real estate, a lot of it going into very safe things or apparently safe things like government bonds, very little into things like private equity or private debt. And this next generation, I think, have grown up with a lot more information available on the internet and through the various newsletters and gurus and whatever. So they've got a wider appreciation of all the other investment options, like crypto, for example. A lot of them want to get into crypto, which their parents would regard as still something that was used by drug dealers and terrorists, whereas they see it as definitely an alternative to the fiat money system, where your wealth is being eroded every day by a mixture of inflation and money printing. So they're more savvy. They're also, I think, they're more willing to take on some degree of investment risk, and that's a very different attitude to their parents. So for me, that's been a very pleasant thing to see, because that very much plays into the part of the market that we operate in. We look at companies that are worth roughly between 20 million and 200 million. And the other big thing that surprised me is that the institutions have moved away from that. They're moving up to the bigger market cap companies, and that's left this funding gap. So the problem is, because the other people we serve, as well as our members who are investors, is the founders of the companies that we invest in. And they have had a really tough few years. I read recently, I think as few as 4.5% of founders are able to get funding to take them to Series A, which is, you tend to have friends and family pre-seed and seed, and then as soon as a company really starts getting serious and growing, they typically need more capital, and they go for what's called a Series A round, and normally the institutions would have provided that. Well, they're kind of exiting the space and leaving this gap, and it's private investors, typically high net worth or family offices, who are filling that gap. And that's where founders are having to go now to get the funding they need to get that critical stage of their growth.
Well, that's really interesting. It does explain a few things that I've seen. I've got another question, just moving on from this, having spoken about change. With a changing market, changing demographic, changing attitude to risk, is it a different group of people that, like you say, inheriting today's money? How do you communicate? How do you as a business owner, how do you market to those people? How do you communicate? What do you give away for kind of free, and what do you charge for, in other words?
Well, one of the things I've been surprised by is I developed an in-depth 2-day coaching workshop on private equity investing, but I found that people are reluctant to pay for things like that. They want the benefit of it, but ideally what came out was a little bit surprising. I thought a lot of the existing people that we knew would really like this. In fact, only about 5% of them wanted to put even a few £100 down to get on the training course. What came out was actually they liked the fact that we were doing all the due diligence and presenting the opportunities to them rather than them having to do all the work and know what they're doing in the details. So it was a lesson to me that they actually want the results of the work, not the ability to do the work. So we have that available. We have 30 hours of video material that we provide to our members, but generally speaking, they seem to want to have the opportunities put to them. And I reject at least 90% of the things that cross my desk. So training was something that people were reluctant to pay for, but they wanted to see the benefits of it. And I think also, membership fees we've tried to charge in the past, and that was a little bit of a barrier to people. It was kind of like, well, I don't really know you that well. Why should I be paying money until I've seen what you're going to give me? So we found that it was actually better to remove membership fees. And we just charge the companies for whom we're raising their capital. And that means we can provide our services free of charge to our members and investors. So what we're doing now is we're actually expanding the range of what we call investor relations services that we make available to the founders. So they want all kinds of content because you've got to engage with investors. They want updates, they want webinars, they want it digitally, they want it online. They might occasionally come to a live event, but the days of all those dog and pony shows going around 50 different venues, they don't want that. They want it now, and they want it from the safety of their own home, wherever they are in the world. And we've got members in America, Britain, Europe, Singapore. Just getting them all together physically would be a nightmare, but online we can make it work. So the content that you need to keep these people engaged is a core part of what we're now providing.
Well, that is very interesting because, that puts more of an onus on you, which forces you to kind of make a bigger investment in your business to be able to go and research that information and then to communicate it and to deliver it and share it. That's actually, but it is, you're right, it's results up front in effect, so people can see what they're getting before they make a bigger commitment. So I get into that, I see that. So it begs the question leading from there, technology, what technology change have you seen that you're using now that you weren't using? I think you touched on it, but that you're not using nearly so much, weren't using nearly so much.
Well, within our own business, we have a pretty sophisticated CRM system that enables us to set up all kinds of response sequences by email, which is still as powerful as ever for all. Everyone thinks it's dead. We're not into the kind of a lot of social media stuff other than LinkedIn, which is, I think, social media for grown-ups. But I think on the platform we use is called Demio, and that enables us to run live events, to have handouts, to have chat, to bring up videos, to bring people on stage with me. So it's all the things you'd have at a live event, but it's done online. So that's been a really helpful platform for us. Plus, we have a podcast. I have a Diary of a High Net Worth Investor podcast. But also, we even use old-fashioned books. You can see a few on the shelf behind me there. And if you're wanting to make an impact, I think, as you know yourself, I know you've done many books. I think I've done 4 now. And it still has an amazing impact. If you hand over a book rather than a business card, it does make an impression. And I was out to dinner with some friends here in Portugal the other day, and I'd forgotten that I'd given one of them a copy of my book. So in front of all these other people, he pulls out this copy of my book, and suddenly it's like, whoa, you're elevated in their positioning just with something like that. So it's any and all of these things. It's physical printed stuff, it's online stuff, it's occasional live events. I'm sure we could do more on social media, but I do find that the kind of people that are relevant to us, people who could put 50 or 100,000 into a single investment, don't seem to spend a lot of time on Instagram or Facebook. It's just never really worked for us. The quality of people we get from there never quite seems to match the profile we're looking for.
It makes a lot of sense. I think what you're telling me is the media has changed, updated, you're using some of the latest technologies available, simplifying things, enabling this remote working, if you like, but it's not remote working in that sense. It's more a case of running an event from a central position, and people from all around the world can now join in, which makes it a lot easier, I guess. But coupled with that, old media, print, if you like, has maintained its impact to a certain degree. Like you said, have a lunch and a dinner, and someone pulls out the book. Absolutely. Yeah, and when it comes to social media, it makes a lot of sense that certain people, certain demographics use certain systems and not others. So I do understand that. So it sounds like what's happening here is your business has transformed, the technology has transformed, your customers have transformed, kind of like quite a lot has changed. Never mind politics, we won't get into that. But I think the one word I might be looking for here is that you have an evolved ecosystem, and your ecosystem has transformed as you've altered and updated your ecosystem, it's transformed and updated your ability to communicate and maintain and keep your customer base, or grow your customer base in a direction that the market is moving towards. So that leaves one final question for me, really, which is how do you, without the physical contact, or maybe there isn't a problem, how do you maintain advocates? How do your customers pull in referrals or suggest other people to you? Does that still part of it?
It's a surprisingly small part of it, actually. I think sometimes you find that people's friends and family are not that financially literate, or sometimes you find that our members don't particularly want their friends to know how much money they've got or how much they're investing. So it's not always a surefire thing as like you have a great meal in a restaurant and you tell all your friends about it. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. But there's no doubt, just to be clear, whilst it's fantastic that we can do so much online these days, there's no substitute for meeting face-to-face. And for example, if we're going to launch an investment, usually I will have travelled wherever I need to go to meet the founder, build some kind of rapport and relationship there. And we do what I typically do, because we live in Portugal and have done for a few years now. I just really kind of compress a whole bunch of meetings into 7 or 10 days. I'll come across to the UK for that, and then we'll just see a whole series of founders and members if we can, perhaps combine it with a live event. It's still important to meet face-to-face. But the other thing I would say as well is, and I think it's increasingly important in this world of AI, is that authenticity and being genuine in not just as a person, but even in things like the way you produce your content. I can always tell the difference if I've used ChatGPT for something versus if I've written it from scratch myself, and so can my members. They can see the difference. So I think whilst it's great to help with research and it's a productivity tool, I think if we go beyond delegating to it and start abdicating to it, I think people start noticing it, and I think it's counterproductive. So I think we have to be careful how we adopt these AI tools, because people want to feel, particularly in an area like finance where trust is so important, they want to feel that this is the genuine you talking to them and not some kind of machine code.
Yeah, and I think that's where your experience will show people who you are, because you're not, it's just not an automated robot. So you've told us about a couple of the challenges and your whistle-stop tour for packing in meetings when you need to travel, which is obviously one way of dealing with having a global client base, I guess. I'd like us just to see if we can finish on, if you can reveal, if you can share, if you've got a challenge that is still outstanding or a challenge that you've recently overcome and how you've overcome it. And maybe that it was that whistle-stop tour mechanism. But
no, I think the challenge that we're overcoming now, because you remember I said the institutions are moving up the food chain.
Yes.
What that means is we're getting higher quality opportunities brought to us than we were a few years ago. But we still have a finite amount of liquidity in our 200 members. So what we're doing now is we're going out to wealth managers and financial advisors and saying, look, the latest research is saying that your next generation clients are 80% likely to change companies unless you provide them with access to private equity opportunities. We can plug that gap for you, so you will get clients that will stay with you. We will get access to new liquidity, and we can share, the benefits of that. So what we're doing now, and I'm at an event next month in London to see hundreds of these wealth managers and advisors, is we're going to start looking for a small number of key partners who really want to get involved in private equity, where we can find the opportunities and they provide the clients with the liquidity, and therefore, obviously, hopefully, the whole would be greater than the sum of the parts. So for us, the challenge now is we've got great opportunities to invest. We need more liquidity than we have within our own base. Therefore, we're going out to look for a small number of key partners to provide that additional liquidity.
That sounds like a heck of a fun challenge to be facing. And it sounds like, as always, Graham, you've got it nailed. You've got a plan. You're going to put it into action, and you're going to make it happen. Thank you for making today happen. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, as always. And I look forward to picking up this conversation and discovering how things work out. And best of luck for the future.
Thanks very much indeed. Thanks for having me on the programme, David.
Thank you.